When this movement becomes acute, then one returns back again to that, having reached where everything becomes reconciled in the right place. Now this story of the child is actually the story of India and the world. This is what has happened. There has been this experimentation, and we are all at present in a disturbed condition, consciously. In our consciousness, there is not that reconciliation, not that harmony, that synthesis, except for Parjanya. She is the only child among all of us here who is leading a very balanced and very spiritual and material life of fullness, in which there is joy here and joy there and joy everywhere. But as far as we all are concerned, we have been divided. And we are living in a great tension of division. We represent today the great experiment of India and the great experiment of Europe put together, and yet unreconciled. This is what Aurobindo now describes here. It is therefore of good augury that after many experiments and verbal solutions, we should now find ourselves standing today in the presence of the two that have alone borne for long the most rigorous tests of experience, the two extremes, and that at the end of the experience, both should have come to a result with the universal instinct in mankind, that veiled judge, sentinel, and representative of the universal spirit of truth, refuses to accept as right or as satisfying. In Europe and in India, respectively, the negation of the materialists and the refusal of the ascetic have sought to assert themselves as the sole truth and to dominate the conception of life. In India, if the result has been a great heaping up of the treasures of the spirit, or of some of them, it has also been a great bankruptcy of life. In Europe, the fullness of riches and the triumphant mastery of this world's powers and possessions have progressed towards an equal bankruptcy in the things of the spirit. Nor has the intellect, which sought the solution of all problems in the one term of matter, found satisfaction in the answer that it has received. Therefore, the time grows ripe, and the tendency of the world moves towards a new and comprehensive affirmation in thought and in inner and outer experience, and to its corollary, a new and rich self-fulfillment in an integral human existence for the individual and for the race. It is against this background that the attempt to make a complete reconciliation is found to be inevitable and necessary. The whole world today is seeking a balance, without even knowing, because the tension of both is great. And the whole world is in a state of unrest and a kind of a pain, psychological pain, whether we understand that pain or not. But that pain is present in the life both of East and the West. And therefore we have got to find a reconciliation. And it is toward that reconciliation that this book presents the right method of reconciliation, something that fulfills the truth of matter and the truth of the spirit. Now, in this truth of matter and the truth of the spirit, the conclusion is not that both are equally true. To say that spirit is real and matter is real, when we use the word real, and if you merely state that both are equally real, then the problem is very difficult, irreconcilable. The reconciliation implies a harmonious relationship. There is a special relationship of spirit to the ultimate and of matter to the ultimate. Both spirit and matter are two terms, and both are related to a reality which is paratpara. Upanishad does not merely speak of para, it speaks of paratpara. Paratpara is that which transcends the transcendental. Spirit transcends matter, therefore spirit is para. But ultimate reality is paratpara. It transcends even spirit, which transcends matter. Therefore, there is a relationship between the spirit and the paratpara and matter with the paratpara. And that relationship is not the same as paratpara has with the spirit and the paratpara has relationship with the matter. They are not of both equal kind of relationship. There is a relationship, but of a different kind. And that subtlety Aurobindo now speaks to us about.
Uncle, can you have a tea break now?
All right. Thank you. As I said, there is a difference between the relationship that spirit has to the paratpara, which Aurobindo calls it here the unknowable, and the relationship that matter has with the unknowable. On account of that difference of relationship, the effectivity of affirmation of spirits and affirmation of matter has also difference. Similarly, the negativity that spiritual negation has towards matter is more effective, more everlasting than the negation that matter gives against the spirit. As Aurobindo says, matter denying spirit is immediately successful, because affirmation of matter is as easy as kicking a football. You can affirm matter so easily. But the negation it makes of the spirit, although immediately you can negate it, but you can't sustain that negativity so long. Therefore, the period of materialists denying the spirit, although effective, it is comparatively short-lived. The spirit denying matter is more difficult. But once it has done it, its effectivity is much greater. Therefore, when we try to understand materialism, we have to understand its force in relationship to the negation that spirit makes of matter. And this chapter, which is devoted to the consideration of the denial of the materialist, in a sense we might say, Aurobindo says, it is not so difficult to defeat the materialist negation. And that is what Aurobindo is doing in this chapter. It is easier to refute materialism than to refute spirituality. It is extremely difficult to deny the spiritualist. Ultimately, neither can be denied, but if there is an exclusivism of spirit or matter, then the refutation of spirituality is more difficult. The refutation of materialist is much easier. And this is the point that Aurobindo is now making. From the difference in the relations of spirit and matter to the unknowable, which they both represent, there arises also a difference of effectiveness in the material and the spiritual negations. The denial of the materialist, although more insistent and immediately successful, more facile in its appeal to the generality of mankind, is yet less enduring, less effective, finally, than the absorbing and perilous refusal of the ascetic. For it, that is to say materialism, carries within itself its own cure. Its most powerful element is the agnosticism which, admitting the unknowable behind all manifestation, extends the limits of the unknowable until it comprehends all that is merely unknown. Its premise is that the physical senses are our sole means of knowledge, and that reason, therefore, even in its most extended and vigorous flights, cannot escape beyond that domain. It must deal always and solely with the facts which they provide or suggest. And the suggestions themselves must always be kept tied to their origins. We cannot go beyond. We cannot use them as a bridge, leading us into a domain where more powerful and less limited faculties come into play, and another kind of inquiry has to be instituted. Now, in this paragraph, apart from saying that materialism is less difficult to refute, Aurobindo gives us in a few lines a cogent and accurate enunciation of materialism. What is materialism? Normally, when we speak of materialism in common parlance, we do not go to the metaphysical aspect of materialism, but we speak of the influence materialism has on life. We normally say the pursuit of success, of money, pleasure, is all materialistic. This is how, in common parlance, we understand the word materialism. But that is only the effect of materialism on life. The basic premise and basic conclusion of materialism is that matter is the only ultimate reality. This is materialism. Matter is the only ultimate reality. This is the assertion of materialism. Matter is the only real. On what grounds can this theory stand? How do you prove that matter is ultimately real? It is in that context that Aurobindo gives us a clear enunciation of materialism. Materialism has a premise and a conclusion, the starting point of the argument, and then the conclusion. What is the starting point of materialism? It says that our physical senses are the means of knowledge. All our knowledge is derived from our physical senses. Therefore, the only thing that we can see is matter. Physical senses can only see matter. Therefore, what is demonstrable, provable to exist is matter. So, the premise is that physical senses are the sole means of our knowledge. Therefore, the only thing that we can see is matter. Therefore, matter is the only thing that we can demonstrate. Therefore, matter alone exists. This is the whole argument. So, read again the premise. Its premise is that physical senses are our sole means of knowledge, and that reason, therefore, even in its most extended and vigorous flights, cannot escape beyond their domain. It must deal always and solely with the facts which they provide or suggest. They mean senses. And the suggestions themselves must always be kept tied to their origins. We cannot go beyond. We cannot use them as a bridge leading us into a domain where more powerful and less limited faculties come into play, and another kind of inquiry has to be instituted. Now, to understand fully this statement, we have to visit many systems of philosophy which are called materialistic. Materialism has been in the world right from earliest times. Even in ancient Greece, there was materialistic philosophy of Chrysippus and Democritus. In India, Charvaka is a very famous materialist philosopher. And this philosophy at one time was not very popular. In Greece,